Ruben, can I just ask you a little bit about the nature of financial centers from a historical perspective? Because if you go back to the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, there was always a preeminent financial center in Europe. And the other financial centers played a kind of subsidiary role. And then sort of power transferred from one financial center to the other, often on the basis of war. Napoleon deprived Amsterdam of its preeminent role and so on and so forth. In the post-war world, it's tended to be rather bipolar, with London and New York being preeminent. Tokyo, when it came up, was primarily inward-looking, domestic, and so forth. I mean, do you think we're still in a bipolar world, but maybe with Hong Kong and Singapore making it tripolar or quadrupolar, and then these other cities we've been talking about are going to be kind of regional sub-centers?
That's a very important and complicated question, and I want to perhaps draw out a couple of points on it. The first is to go to the notion of what a financial center is, and to distinguish that today from, I think, its historical context, where a financial center was very much associated with the existence of an institution and exchange at the center of such a financial center. And my view is that we have now changed, so that the future of London, for example, is completely independent of the future of the London Stock Exchange, I would say, okay? And that is, that has several implications for the ongoing success of London, which means that, for example, were the London Stock Exchange to be taken over by NASDAQ, as was proposed, or Deutsche Börse previously, or anybody else, I don't think that that would adversely affect the position of London as a financial center. The second element which I think is worth discussing is the relationship between, and this is a very complicated relationship, the relationship between a financial center and the economy within which it operates. And that by itself is ambiguous, because does it operate in a city or a national or a regional or a global economy? Michael and I were talking previously, and we were talking long periods, 500 years. And my view is that, this is nothing new, we are at the beginning, or beyond the end of the beginning, of the decline of London. Okay? Or the UK as an important economic power. Let's be blunt. Okay? It's a caricature, but it's blunt, and may or may not be true, but let's accept that for the moment. So then the question is, can London, or the City of London, within these four walls, continue to be an international financial centre given its national relative decline? And I think there are a couple of interesting points about that. The first is that we maybe are at a different stage of the world. Maybe history has changed in the sense that it is conceivable that it could be. That by itself is remarkable, because previously I think you would say that were in the Italian Renaissance empires or the Spanish empires to decline, those financial centers would also decline. But I think it's conceivable that London could remain as an international finance center, even though the UK declined. But I think it's unlikely. Then coming to your final question, is it 1, 2, or 3? And this is an issue which has been raised by many people. I understand Michael's methodology about that you are using opinions about the future to build up an index. So I understand that. But it seems to me that I still feel that is very volatile. So we've seen a big change over 6 months, but changes in financial centers, from my point of view, still take decades. So I would still be arguing that, we are a decade away from the disappearance of London and New York as a financial center, and we are more than a decade away from the existence of a third financial center, if I could put it
That's pretty radical stuff, Michael. I mean, a decade and London disappears. I mean, one of the points about financial centers is that there are huge advantages in incumbency, in the shape of liquidity, in the shape of network effects, and all sorts of things like that. I mean, do you share Ruben's view that it's going to go pretty fast?
No.
I mean, you say a decade.
Let me just correct one point, which okay. I think you got, which is that I'm not predicting that London will disappear within a decade. I'm saying that if it is to disappear, it's going to carry on for at least a decade. It may carry on for 100 years. So yes. I'm not predicting its demise, sorry.
I'd like to pick up on 2 points, history and rule of law. And I think Ruben's got an interesting point here on it. If you go back and you look at the literature of great financial centers in the 70s and 80s, it was very clear how you built a global financial center. You had a large domestic economy. That was the theory. It was very much the prevailing theory that London, despite the relative decline of Britain since World War I, actually, had it because of its domestic economy. New York had it because of its domestic economy. And without doubt, the third financial center in the literature that time was going to be Tokyo. There was no question. Now, Tokyo in our index is certainly not an insignificant center, but it's not up there amongst the top three. So I think that kind of blows that theory that it comes off the back of. This goes back to your point, John. It is interesting as well. Capital is very flighty, and therefore, because it can fly so fast, it actually wants the most stable place.
Yeah.
And good financial centers are those that haven't been invaded, is not a bad way to look at it. So the power theory has changed a lot. I'd also like to remind people, though, if you go put your mind back to 2002, the Center for the Study of Financial Innovation conducted a piece of research called Sizing Up the City. And it was done because at that point, less than a decade ago, we were terrified that we were going to lose our advantage to Europe because Britain was not in the euro. And this was a study done to say, despite the fact we weren't in the euro, things were all right 2 years on. That study felt it only had to look at London, New York, Paris, and Frankfurt.
Yes. Well,
That was all it had to look at.
Yeah. Well, Chris, could I just develop a further point? I mean, if we talk about the shape of the geography of financial centers and think back a shorter historical terms, the 80s and 90s, I mean, then we started to see continental European financial centers beginning to take quite a bit of business away from London. But on the whole, it seemed, particularly in securities markets, to be a positive-sum game in the sense that although London lost market share, the volume of business was actually increasing so fast that London continued to grow quite well. Are we still in that kind of world as you look at cities and the BRICS coming along, or do you think it's a tougher world and it's not a positive-sum game?
I think it's definitely a tougher world. Without a shadow of a doubt, it's definitely a tougher world. I'm more by inclination an optimist, though. So as I see the development of the world, and I think if world trade grows, then our economy will grow, and we have the opportunity to participate in a growing global economy. My worry is that Europe gets overlooked. And just coming back to Ruben's point a moment ago, it is entirely possible to develop a deconstructionist theory of the future of London and the UK's role in financial services, because you'd say, well, actually, rule of law we've discussed, but I can get on a plane to Singapore and visit Maxwell Chambers, marketed under the heading of UK law but cheaper. So we're losing our advantage there. English is the business language. Well, Latin was the lingua franca far longer than English has been the business language, and how many people speak Mandarin Chinese. We could talk about the fact that we were in the right time zone, but of course the development of south-south trade means that we're in exactly the wrong time zone. So it is possible to advance these theories. So what's going to keep us in the game then? Hopefully the attitude point I mentioned a moment or two ago. But I think the notion that that it's different this time, if I can use that dreaded phrase, the fact that it is possible to unhook a financial centre from the domestic economy. We managed to do very well. End of empire, we kept the capital markets here in the UK. I think we were the first empire actually to achieve that. So we learned some lessons, I think, from that, and certainly the benefit of the agglomeration economy within London has proved very sticky, very resilient. The thing that worries me, though, is that icebergs melt from the bottom, not from the top. So it's not the major icebergs of HSBC or Standard Chartered moving, it's that gradual trickle away. But I still think that the benefits of the agglomeration economy are a super glue, which gives people a reason to be here. I also think the reason for firms coming in here is the knowledge, the expertise, the sense of history, particularly at this moment in the world's evolution, where a sense of stability really counts for something. It doesn't matter which part of the world you're operating in, that sense of stability. I remember reading some research, it may well have been in your column, John, actually, in the FT, looking at the type of money that London traditionally gets. And it doesn't get the hot money, the new money, the money from those individuals who are making it. It tends to attract money from those individuals, those corporates who want to look after it. And from that point of view, They value all those traditional things that London has done very well in. So there are reasons to be optimistic. I'm tempted to end on a down note and start talking about, so what is going on in the Eurozone and the next 10 years, but I'll pause there. I'll pause there, because I'd like to end on a high for this little bit anyway.
Ruben, you wanted to
Yeah,
make...
I wanted to bring up something that you said, which I also think is very important. I've run a USAID, which is an arm of the US government, project in Kyrgyzstan, which nobody's ever heard of, which was setting up a whole capital markets. Okay, so we were doing everything, the exchange, whatever it was. Okay, and in doing so, we had to do exactly as both of you were talking about, tick a whole series of very important boxes with regards to the establishment of property rights and so on and so forth. But I actually think, contrary to that, and where you were going, that the existence and thriving of a financial centre is very much to do with an instinctive hunger. Yeah. It's to do with primal instincts, if you will, okay? I can be tech as much as you want and administrative in detail, but that's what I think is important. And you didn't go there, but let's go there for a bit, and let's be incredibly pessimistic, because I think we've got every reason to be. Here in the UK, I mean, I can point to just 101 different factors, from politics to societal to a whole range of different downers on the existence of these raw beasts who are bringing the financial centre here. And I can also point to around us being encircled by people who certainly want to do us down, see it as a zero-sum game, and in fact don't see this as an important game at all, would rather shrink the pot, would not only want to seize whatever they can of the pot, but would rather see the pot shrink. And that together, those seem to be rather pessimistic factors for our continued existence, much as I too, much against the fact that I am both an entrepreneur, capitalist, and very enthusiastic.